Hey everyone, welcome back to Rocks for Jocks. My name is Alex and I'm going to be your host again for the show today. So today I have a solo episode for you all. So it's just going to be me on the microphone, reading an article that I posted on Substack recently, along with a couple extra notes and comments for the podcast only. Alright, should be a great time. If you like this episode, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're listening, and then subscribe on Substack. I'm going to put the link to subscribe on Substack into the show notes for this episode. So it'll be just one click wherever you're listening from. And if you really like the episode, send it to a friend. Everyone loves podcasts. I guarantee you they're going to love listening to this episode. All right, let's jump into it. Title of this article is Want to Solve Hard Problems? Fund Niche Research. The premise behind this is that science moves forward by one narrow question at a time. We want to fund research into a wide variety of niche science topics to help us find unknown unknowns, which are going to be things that we wouldn't even think to look for directly. Then using the outcomes of all those projects, we want to connect new discoveries to help us solve hard, complicated problems in the real world, often with economic or security payoffs to the groups funding those projects. All right. Into the text of the article. Scientific research often focuses on specific and sometimes hyper-specific topics that can feel pretty far removed from everyday concerns. At a moment when research funding is being publicly scrutinized, I think it's totally fair to ask, why should we care about all this niche work? Short answer is, funding niche science research expands the bounds of human knowledge and makes new breakthroughs possible. Over the last year, research groups in the US have come under growing pressure to justify their value and avoid budget cuts. Even before that, securing funding through annual grant proposals was one of the more frustrating parts of the job for many scientists. As research gets dragged into the public eye further and further, I think the purpose and conclusions of individual studies get increasingly easy to misunderstand and misconstrue. So instead of attacking or playing defense for individual papers, I think it's worth zooming out to ask, what is this research actually for? In my opinion, funding a wide range of research allows for unexpected connections and breakthroughs, from medical technologies to building better catastrophe models to learning about how the universe works. Progress tends to come from exploring really widely until new things work, because a lot of the times we don't understand what we need to know until after we've learned it. To solve hard problems, we need to just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. So without research constantly pushing forward our body of human knowledge across all these different niche research areas, we might never discover the knowledge that future breakthroughs depend on. So how exactly does funding research help us learn things? This section is especially relevant for people that consider themselves pragmatists. Maybe you don't understand why so much research is needed in the first place. And maybe the research should only get funded if it produces clear, actionable results. Ideally results with financial payoffs. In other words, pragmatists want to fund what works and skip what doesn't obviously apply to the quote-unquote real world. In a lot of ways, I think that instinct makes sense. But I think there actually is a deeply pragmatic reason to fund all kinds of research, including work without any immediate obvious applications. So one way to better think about why funding all this different research matters is through the lens of venture capital. When venture capital firms fund startup companies, they don't bet everything on a single company. They spread smaller investments across a bunch of different ideas. Most of those ideas fail, but a few succeed and strike gold. And those rare successes more than make up for all the losses. So for my pragmatic people, I want you to think about research funding as academia's version of venture capital. You invest in a lot of research projects and accept that the outcomes are going to vary. Some create major breakthroughs, some become building blocks for other projects, and some provide just a small piece of knowledge that may or may not be useful a couple of years or decades down the line. Unlike for-profit companies, most science research is not designed to deliver short-term wins. And understandably, that makes it a harder sell to the public. But almost no one is doing research to dramatically improve your life next month or next year. They do research to improve the lives of large groups of people over the next decade or the next century. If we take this metaphor one step forward and we think about science funding as the venture capital of learning things, why is learning things in all these different niche topics helpful? Why should we keep putting time and money into research on topics so far removed from daily life? Let's think about it as venture capital of like a complicated problem in the real world, such as the fight against climate change. If we're funding a bunch of research groups to look into solutions, we don't know ahead of time which ideas or which groups are going to be the most successful. So we want to fund a bunch of them. We throw money to a few dozen or a few hundred different groups and then let them explore different problems in a bunch of different ways. Some of those groups are going to pivot once or twice and maybe only generate incremental progress. But a few of those groups are going to produce the next big thing. In venture capital, the next great thing typically makes you a lot of money by solving problems that make money. But in science, solving big, thorny problems tends to generate public value instead. So what do funders of science research get in exchange for quote unquote helping the world? For global powers like the US, I would argue they get quite a lot. When you have a country that has extensive symbiotic ties to the rest of the world, solving international problems helps us all the time, even if we only consider selfish things like economic benefits or social stability or political security. A couple examples I have on here about topics related to climate change are going to be things like fishing and trade routes are definitely affected by climate change, whether that's through ocean temperatures changing or rising sea levels or ocean acidification. Maybe we want to think about natural hazards that hurt people in every country all around the world. Things like hurricanes and wildfires are also going to be directly affected by temperature, humidity, wind currents, water currents. Maybe we want to look at types and amounts of crops you can grow each year, which are going to depend on rainfall, temperature, windstorms, flood patterns, soil nutrients. Every study we fund gives us one more tiny window into the nuanced detail of these hard problems. With every study, we learn a little bit more about flooding levels or rainfall patterns, or the impact of temperature change on a certain type of crop. Is one more niche scientific study going to guarantee you stable crops forever? No. But they can certainly give you more insights into climate patterns, maybe how those patterns are changing, and what are the best ways to fight back against climate change, which in turn are going to help all those other problems I listed earlier. There's also a really cool byproduct I want to talk about that you get from all types of projects, whether they help you with things directly in the real world or not. And that byproduct is going to be people who know how to tackle complex problems. By supporting university research and national labs, we get to train thousands of brilliant new problem solvers every year. I want you to think for a moment about all the new engineers and statisticians and scientists who go on to have full careers in all types of fields, like medicine or robotics or software. For a lot of those advanced degrees, learning to reason through hard problems with ambiguous outcomes happens primarily through funded research. In the long run, as people with advanced STEM training branch into different sectors and tackle real-world problems, the original investments keep compounding and providing value to the country which funded them. And like many good venture capital bets, we might have to wait for them to fully pay off a few years or decades later. And that's okay. So to recap, number one, funding research into a wide range of niche science topics helps us find unknown unknowns that we wouldn't even have thought to look for in the first place directly. Number two, connecting new discoveries from those unknown unknowns helps us solve complicated problems, often with real economic and security payoffs to the funder. Number three, training people to solve those complex problems creates compounding returns over time, continuing to benefit the funding country and the broader world over decades to come. Thank you so much for everyone for listening. If you made it to this point of the episode, I'm here to let you know you are legally required to subscribe to Rocks for Jocks wherever you're listening. Subscribe to Rocks for Jocks on Substack and send this episode to a friend or family member. Thanks again for listening, and take care.